what's up guys? I hope you all had a great weekend. We got a job today that was discovered by our Thermovision crew. So we've got a crew that goes around to all the major feeders, well, all the feeders really, but especially the major feeders, the main lines, substations, and look for hotspots. So we've seen this gizmo a few times in some videos now, which detects temperature. That's why they call it Thermovision camera. You guys, quick display, you can see my hand. It can very easily tell the difference. Temperature 35.1 degrees in my hand, and then the background, the ambient temperature is 21.8 degrees. So basically our thermal crew has a much more expensive version. This guy has a great big telescope looking thing on the roof of the van, and they drive around shooting the lines, all the connections. So we're at a school right now, and we've got this riser pole, 3-phase, 12-470 volts, feeding a pad mount transformer behind us, and this little sideline is fed off that double circuit line off the distance there, and we've got a hotspot on that center cutout. My window just broke. Oh, there it goes. So can't see much, but the body of the cutout itself is hot. So there's a good chance that porcelain is cracked or broken. So the issue we've got today, changing the cutout, easy job, we do it all the time. But in order to change the cutout, we have to open them. And where that cutout is feeding an entire school behind me, there's going to be some load on it. You can't just yank the cutout open, you're going to draw an arc. So you have to use a load buster. That load buster hooks onto the cutout, and you pull it down quite hard until that spring breaks the load. Last thing you want to do is put a load buster on a cutout that's broken. That thing's going to come apart on you. Definitely going to get an arc flash. So we've got two options. Sometimes if there's only a little bit of load, we'll take hotline cutters, cut the lead, let it fall clear. But there's enough load on this guy, you're not gonna mess around with that. So you can kill the main line, which if we do that here, we're gonna lose like 2,500 customers. It would be very brief. We'd have a guy at the substation, hit the magic button, drop the line out, he would cut that lead clear, close the line back in. It'd be like maybe a 30-second interruption. But a 30-second interruption for 2,500 customers, a lot of businesses and stuff, still not cool if you can avoid it. So I think what we'll do, we'll head back to the pad mount transformer and see if we can drop the load on the bayonet fuses. You can remove those fuses under load. Now, another problem with this, let's see if we can get a mirror share. Look in my mirror, we'll zoom in. Well, those kids are running around. Our pad mount transformer is inside that fenced-in compound. And apparently my mirror is quite dirty. So I've done many of inspections on that pad mount, had it open many times. I've never actually worked in. I don't know, a fence like that, that's not really the greatest idea. You got a 6-foot-long hot stick, you're trying to work in there safely. You've got a grounded fence all around you, no escape route. Not cool. But we'll take a closer look, we'll see how much room we actually got. We'll see if we can stand at a safe point and pop those bayonet fuses open and drop the load, at which point then we can safely remove that cutout lead, or cut it, or open the door, whatever we gotta do. One other thing I want to mention, I'm filling out a locate sheet here for emergency locates. We've got a broken pole on the other end of town. It's been a busy day. But something else I will mention, if we look on the pole there, you see that yellow tag hanging off the pole. That's on the switch pole. That yellow tag is there identifying that there's an issue with the switch. It's called a conditions abnormal tag. So the abnormal condition is that we've identified that switch as possibly being broken. So that tag is on the pole in the field as well as on the system at dispatch. So if guys go to open that in the field, they're going to see the tag. If for some reason they don't, or if it gets ripped off, we don't open switches without talking to the dispatcher. Anyways, as soon as they talk to dispatch, bring up that switch number, that's permanently tagged in the system until the problem is rectified. Alright guys, so it looks like we'll be able to open those bayonets without too much trouble. You'll see what I mean here. This is our pad mount inside the fence. I mean, I don't blame them for building the fence where it's in a school yard. As I said, it does pose a bit of a hazard where these are grounded steel posts and there's not a whole lot. For example, those elbows, definitely not enough for them to pop those elbows off while energized. Usually not a big deal if we isolate the cables. Once the line's dead, the cables are dead, you can pop them off. Put grounds in the line, you'd have to do it by hand. But these are our bayonet fuses right here. That fuses not between this is important. This is a feed through, so if we plug in some cables on the B side, we could feed through and grab another pad mount. That's all 7200 volts. But those fuses are between the high voltage, either one of those sides, and the low voltage. So if there's a fault on those low voltage bushings, that's when these guys pop. So you can open them under load. You want to drain the oil pressure first with this pressure release valve, so we'll do that with a hot stick in case if there's any pressure in there, that oil is going to shoot back at you. And then you're going to want to stand on the side right about here. It's pretty handy where we have the lid that lifts up. So you can stand off to the side over here with a hot stick and pop those fuses out. That'll drop all the load off. It'll shut the power completely off to the school. I left the pad mount open, but we did close the gate, and we're not going to move from right here. I'm going to sit right here in my truck. There's a few kids playing around at the park. We will make sure, of course, that the kids are nowhere near the area when we pop those open, and as soon as they're opened up, that pad mount switcher will be, or that pad mount transformer will be completely locked up. So my plan was to capture the entire job once we start changing the cutout. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to do that. I've got to head and help the other two guys with the broken pole. This job here is a 2-man job. The broken pole is a 3-man job. I can definitely use my help up there. So, and we've only got 5 hours until we hit our max hours. Basically, what the process would look like once the load is removed, the cutout that's broken, we'll take hotline cutters, we will clip that lead so it drops completely off. If there's no load, it's not going to draw an arc, and it's not going to hit anything. It's not going to hit a dead short or anything. All the wires are going to fall dead. The other two cutouts, they will open those guys up, remove the taps. We will then check for potential and install grounds on all 3 phases. 1, 2, 3 grounds. And the overhead stuff's all still energized. So using their 20 kV gloves, they'll simply lift the cutout off, put the new cutout on, do that 3 times, because why not change all 3 over here? Might as well. So once they're done, they will reinstall their leads, back it up. We're going to re-energize, we're going to close those bayonet fuses back in while the line's out. There's no sense in picking up load, energize, slamming those back in. So while the line's out, we will put all 3 of those bayonet fuses back in. Then they will reinstall their leads, close the cutouts, and that's it. Another job done. Saved a pole fire. If we hadn't found that cracked cutout, it could track through to the bracket, heat up the pole, eventually catch that pole on fire. So it was a good catch by our thermo crew. So the first step before pulling the bayonet fuses is to give a tug on the pressure relief valve. There's built up air pressure in the oil reservoir of that pad mount transformer. If there was, as soon as you release this latch on the bayonet fuse and break the seal, you could have some oil squirt out at you. So basically, you wanna yank it out a good 4 to 6 inches to break the contact where the fuse is seated, and then you don't want to completely pull out the fuse. You'd have oil kind of run all over the place. You see on this middle one here, once he unlocks it, he's going to pop it out. As I mentioned, a good 4 to 6 inches, right about there. Yanked her a little quick there. We did see some oil come out. Those little black trays at the bottom are in place to catch any of that oil that comes out. You see on this one, if he pulls it out a little bit slower here, there we go. And then wait for that oil to drip off, and then catch that excess oil in that tray. Beauty. Alright, so that went good. We've got the load shut off, so pretty much opened the switch, for lack of better words, at the pad mount transformer. So the power's out at the school. That overhead 3-phase is still energized. So the boys are going to set up their 2 trucks are here now. So they're going to cut the lead on that center phase cutout and change that cutout. For those of you that are new to the channel, if you scroll through, I've got 2 or 3 videos where we changed cutouts. I do have a GoPro one that we changed off hooks. I've got a couple we changed out of the bucket. I'm actually planning on doing a video specifically about cutouts, about the load break cutouts, the load buster, where exactly the current flows through the cutouts and how all that stuff works. I'm hoping to have that up in the next couple weeks. But I gotta hit the road. We're skipping supper today. In fact, we skipped dinner today too. Maybe I should grab a sandwich on the way out.
So we're at the location of the broken pole now. Usually we get broken poles from vehicle accidents, construction accidents. This one here is just an old rotten pole. It broke off below the ground. You can see just by pushing on it with my hand, she's swaying back and forth pretty bad. It's pretty well ready to fall. The boys got everything all ready, got the auger out, but we're still waiting on our locate
give her a pull real hard
from the telephone company at this point.
Beauty. That pole was rotten.
We figured we might as well get started, start stripping the old pole out of the ground. Not a whole lot of work we can do until we get our locates, really. That triplex is still energized. We're going to leave that energized throughout the entire job. It's 122/40 volts. It's not going to be much of a hazard while we're working.
Alright, as soon as we get our locates, we got locates from the village for water and sewer. We're all clear for gas. We're just waiting for locates for the communication company. I'm pretty sure there's nothing underground there, but we can't break ground until we get clearance. And we're running out of time here. So hopefully they show up soon. Get that pole planted in the ground. Once that pole's in the ground, it's going to be pretty quick and easy to get that wire back on it, and we'll get out of here.
So the sun's gone down and locates finally all came in. We can start digging here. So whenever you're digging to set a pole, as the auger gets deeper in the ground, it tends to go off kilter a little bit. So you always have someone, basically a spotter, while you're digging, getting to line the auger up so it's perfectly straight up and down. Sometimes you gotta extend or retract a little bit, just move slightly to the left or the right. Sometimes the auger hits some pretty big rocks underground as well, and that'll knock the auger out of place a little bit. Not really a big deal here. That hole, we could dig that hole in any direction a couple feet, and it's not going to really impact the piece of triplex that's feeding that home. It's the only wire that's going back on that pole. Pretty easy digging. The soil's almost like sand. Now right here, you guys are probably gonna laugh at this. He gives it a shake a little bit too early, and the dirt all goes back in the hole. So what was going on here, as he lifted the auger up and out of the ground, it was hitting the triplex. That's why he kind of stopped, just shook it off right there. So we take our extendo stick, get him a bit of extra clearance so we can pass underneath that triplex, get up on the hill a little bit more. It's going to be a lot easier for us to shovel that dirt back down into the hole if we clean it off on the upper side of the hill as opposed to down in the ditch there. The first time, he didn't want to put any pressure with the sharp edges of the tip of that boom against that triplex where it is energized. So for the remainder of the dig, we'll have Johnny here help guide the auger in place, and I'll hold this extendo stick and keep the wire up and out of the way. Johnny was just sticking that shovel in the ground a minute ago because that shovel's exactly 5 feet long, and we're pretty well digging a 6-foot hole. So how we go about the depth of the hole is total pole length. In this case, it's a 35 footer. You want 10% of the pole length. There's your pole there. Plus 2 feet. So 10% of a 35 footer would be 3.5 feet plus 2 feet, so 5.5 feet. That's plenty for this pole. Many times we try and go a minimum of 6 feet. So 35 footers will put 6 feet in the ground. And if we get, let's say, a 60 footer, we'll go 8 feet. On occasion, if the customer's running an underground service to the pole, we know they're going to be digging near the pole to trench and put their conduit in. Sometimes we'll go an extra 2 feet in depth. That way there's 6 feet of good earth holding that pole in place. Pretty ideal digging conditions, really, except for the rocks. There's a ton of big rocks in the ground. You could hear a few times the auger was fetching up, kind of grinding.
Collapsing around the sides quite a bit.
Some of those big rocks was kicking our auger around the hole, making the hole a little bit bigger than necessary, and also where the ground's so fine, it was collapsing in on us a little bit. So we got our 5.5, almost 6 feet in this case. So when you're putting the auger away, make sure you do not stand underneath it. Got a pretty rugged strap holding that up. If that were to snap or let go or pinch and drop, I don't know what that auger weighs, but definitely do not want to stand in this path. Don't be in the drop zone of that auger.
No more. No more.
So the latch here, when the auger's fully wound up in place, it'll release the latch. For some reason it's sticking here. You'll see on this, there we go. So both the strap and that latch holds that auger in place. Pretty easy pole to set. There's no wires to move around. A lot of times when you're doing these broken poles, you gotta pick up the pole from over top of the telephone, drop your winch down, gotta navigate in through the 3-phase wires. This guy here, we've just got the triplex to worry about. So we get Johnny Smooth on the butt of the pole here, kind of guiding it into the hole. Once the butt's lined up, you can shove her down. It makes it a little bit easier to control once the butt of the pole's down in the hole. Down in the hole. You still don't want to try to rub it up too hard against the wires. We don't have any of the pole grabbers on our booms, so pretty much just tighten up the winch, and there are some fins on either side to stabilize that pole. Once you have it in place, when I refer to stuff it in the ground, you usually can put a bit of pressure and gain an extra 6 inches to a foot in the ground. All of our poles have a 10-foot mark. That's what that stamp is there. It's either a stamp or a nail or something. So if anyone's ever digging near a pole, doing ditching or something, you want to know how much the pole's in the ground, you can reference that 10-foot mark. And once you get into poles 60 feet above, I believe it's at 14 feet. I don't set transmission poles very often. And right here, we're just using a plumb bob. Best position to put yourself in when plumbing the pole is directly underneath the boom and then perpendicular to the boom. That way, as you're making corrections to the pole, you can simply extend or retract and then swing left or right instead of using the controls working together. And you typically want to lean the pole back away from the conductor a little bit. So if this was a dead-end pole, you'd set it back maybe 6 inches at the top, lean it back away, as it will settle eventually. It'll pull towards the lines, even with the anchor on. So you always got to tamp your dirt. We didn't use a hydraulic tamper there. The soil was pretty well self-tamping. If you've got a lot of muck and stuff, you'd have to hook up the hydraulic tamper and make sure that pole really doesn't move once in place. So we're just gearing up to tie the triplex in. Probably the easiest pole you could ever set and the easiest job once it's set. All we got to do is knock a J-hook in there, hang that triplex. But oh, that wedge clamp is completely rotten, so we'll have to replace that. But what we're going to do before going up and putting our J-hook in place, this pole's 5 or 6 feet taller than the old one. The wire is crossing a roadway, so our standards to use a 35-footer anytime wires cross a road. We're going to take it by hand and bring that wire up as high as we can without a whole lot of pressure. I don't want to use mechanical leverage or come-alongs or my boom and put too much pressure on that wire. So we're just going to bring it up by hand. As soon as we get enough resistance that I'm starting to have a hard time holding it, we'll mark in place where that wire is going to go in the pole. Really, if we wanted to, we could cut the last 4 or 5 feet off the top of that pole, but it's not necessary. So we just set the triplex on my boom there with the neutral down so we're not pinching against those hot wires, just on the round edge of my boom. And we'll just use a hammer and hammer that J-hook in. If we were crossing a highway of any sort, this is just an access road, just a dirt access road. If it was crossing a highway or something, we wouldn't be hammering a J-hook in. We'd be drilling a hole and attaching the wire to a dead end clamp as opposed to just some wedge clamps on a J-hook. Same thing goes for train tracks, river crossings, and main roadways. You don't want to just hang the wire in a J-hook. You definitely want something a little bit more secure. But we did this whole job by hand. We didn't use come-alongs to string that wire at all. It's just number 2 triplex. There's barely any tension on it at all. I could hold that tension up with one hand. So that's it. There was a telephone wire on this pole. That's why you saw the ladder on the house at the start of the video. There was an old telephone line that the customer requested that we clip that off. So we removed that. We got that triplex tied in pretty well, good to go. We've gonna be home in an hour, and we're an hour away from home, so we're gonna pack things up here pretty quick and hit the road.
Alright guys, so that went pretty good, pretty well. As simple as they come as far as setting a pole. Digging was, I don't want to say easy, there's a lot of great big rocks in that soil. This was all fill, machine filled road, so a lot of rocks in there. But boys are packing her in, we get her done. I gotta fill out a report, just basically charge out the pole, and we didn't use any material, J-hook. I wanted to give a shout out to Linestar and Carl. They're new to the area, distributor of power line equipment. We, being on the committee that looks after tools and work methods for the company, we had ordered some tools to try out, and the head guy said, can you bring these tools back to a fellow named Carl at Linestar? And so I brought the tools back, and he was showing me around the shop, which just opened. They got a ton of gear there. So anyone that watches this locally that knows where my home office is, check it out. They've got all kinds of stuff coming in. They're just getting set up, but they took me in the warehouse and they got all kinds of cool stuff from pretty well every manufacturer. So great guy, and I'm sure we'll be talking lots. We're gonna shut this down, head back home. See you guys all soon, and be safe.